From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, show about Star Wars pop culture, the ultimate adventure, life itself. I'm Ken Napzok, and welcome back to the second edition of Blank is Why We Love Star Wars. And today, it is Dexter Jettster is Why We Love Star Wars. I have been a fan of Dexter for a while. He is a favorite around these spots. Joseph Scrubshaw and I did a breakdown of the Dexter Jettster diner scene from Attack of the Clones that I still talk about at parties. Actually, I brag about it at parties. It's one of my favorite Force Center episodes. Did I always love Dexter? Did I have to kind of grow with him as I did the prequels? We'll find that out today, but I'm not in focus here today. No. To celebrate Dexter Jettster, and all the syllables in his names, we are bringing on Bryan Ward. Bryan is here. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm having a lot of fun. I got my Dexter diner, my Texas diner, Bryan Ward original shirt. I'm here to discuss one of our favorite characters. And for those that don't know Bryan, you actually probably do know Bryan. Bryan, in addition to being just a talented artist, a Photoshop master, we'll definitely get into that. Bryan has imaged, designed, and branded many a Star Wars podcast and show in the space, beginning, I believe, with ForceCenter. I don't want to, act like we were the first, but I feel in my heart we were the first.
I think, well, you were definitely the first Star Wars show. I don't know if it was you or the Schmodown Collider shows.
Right.
That I started with, but it was right around the same time, but that all started like the madness of the last 7 years of working on all these different shows and a lot of hours at my desk designing thumbnails and logos and
podcast art and all that.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Dexter Jettster today, and he is a special place in your heart without a doubt. But I want to start with the bigger picture. One of your favorite aspects of Star Wars is creature design, and kind of the weird side of Star Wars, right?
Yeah, definitely I don't know, just the overall creative side, like the character designs, the droids, the sets, the costumes, like basically all the stuff you see in the behind the scenes documentaries. That's what draws me to Star Wars the most. Like I like all the stories and the themes and characters and all of that, but it's the making part of it that I've always liked the most. And so any weird creature that doesn't seem like it makes sense at first, but then becomes the most Star Wars thing you've ever seen, that's like my favorite thing and what draws me in the most.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, look, Star Wars is weird, and I love celebrating that, and it doesn't always hit for me, and I sometimes have to remind myself that Star Wars is weird. I solo a Star Wars story, which is something we'll be celebrating on this show in the new year. The Lady Proxima and Linda Hunt voicing her didn't immediately hit me. I was like, well, that was kind of silly and weird. And then you kind of pull back and you go, well, yeah, that's exactly what this is supposed to be. It doesn't mean it always has to be, every frame has to be that, but it's definitely the spirit. And yeah, looking back on Star Wars, it's I think we just accept, and I'm talking about our generation, you and I kind of being the original trilogy generation. I think we just kind of accept that stormtroopers rode giant lizards. We didn't question it because we were young. That was a dewback. It wasn't a giant lizard.
Yeah, that's kind of like the key thing for me in Star Wars is the expanding possibilities of like growing up watching the original trilogy. If you told me the next movie that you see will have these weird aliens racing space vehicles through the desert, like I never would have believed that. Like I wouldn't, the world where Luke and Han and Leia and everyone, suddenly all these weird aliens are going to be racing through the desert, or there's going to be a 50s space diner. Like, but now that feels right. It feels like it's a part of the series. So like it's constantly new things they don't make sense suddenly are now part of what makes Star Wars for me. And so anytime they add more stuff like that, and we've gotten some of that in the new stuff too, like characters interacting with each other through the Force. That's like one of my favorite things from the sequel trilogy is the Force Skype stuff, or any of that. Any moment where I'm like, that doesn't seem like something I've ever seen in Star Wars, but it feels right.
Yeah,
that's what draws me in the most.
Do you have those moments where it feels initially maybe doesn't hit? I don't want to say feels too weird, but you have to kind of work through it and remind yourself like I do, or is it just kind of you're looking for that stuff anyways?
I'm sure there's some moments where I was like, that doesn't feel Star Wars to me. Like when I first saw in Skeleton Crew the suburbs stuff, I was like, I don't know exactly, but then I don't know, like it just works for me now. Now that I've seen some of the show, I'm like, it doesn't even bother me. I don't even think twice about it. Obviously there'd be different planets with different areas, but that felt weird. There's moments like that, but I don't know. I guess I just always am open to the idea of Star Wars expanding what's possible and becoming bigger, I guess.
That's a great. No, I love the way you're looking at it. This big table that everything can sit at. We always talk about all kinds of fans sitting at the table, but all kinds of ideas. And I'm glad you mentioned the suburbs. Something that I've liked in Skeleton Crew. I just bought into it early, but it's not unlike a 1950s diner set on a space planet, an entire planet city. I think it's how you use it, and that transitioning a little bit more directly to Dexter here. It, in 2002, was not my favorite thing, but also I wouldn't say I fought against it, but it was one of those things that you come out of the theater and you're talking to your friends, and this is 2002, so I don't know, maybe we're going to Friendster to talk about it, but really not yet. And it's just kind of like, if someone in my circle was upset with that, the 50s diner and a four-armed cook, then that'd be, I guess, yeah, you're right. You know, you'd be pushed off the pedestal of things you liked pretty easy back then, and I think a lot of times that happens. So I think, but it's how you use it, and the more you dive into the theme of Dexter's Diner and the scene itself, it is just used, I don't say correctly like there's a right or wrong, but it's just used well. And I think the suburbs are well. It's a lived-in world with purpose in the story, not just, hey, what if we did this, you want pancakes in Star Wars? Let's have some pancakes. That's a different vibe than this is a setting with purpose.
Yeah, and that quickly reminds me of another moment that I didn't love instantly was, and we've gotten it again, was Cyril with his cereal in Andor. I was like, is it really where you've got basically Cocoa Puffs in Star Wars, but like, doesn't bother me now. Like, I think it's funny. Part of it is, I guess, my weird ability to take things that don't make sense and then turn them into something I like just because I make dumb Photoshops out of them over and over and over again to the point where I actually start liking it. Yeah. So it becomes a thing I like, even though maybe at first it wasn't my favorite thing.
That's like me and the Spice Girls. It's great. I made fun of them until I was the biggest fan. I absolutely love that. Going to the Dexter of it all, I guess I want to find out. I'm going to celebrate the character without a doubt, and I'll throw a link up to the YouTube video. I think Joseph and I released an audio-only video of our breakdown of the scene. So the themes of the episode will come up. I'll set it up here a little bit of just what we kind of feel here collectively at ForceCenter is it's a 50s diner, which this is a 1950s pulp film noir kind of movie, Attack of the Clones, so that kind of works. But it is, to me, the intersection of knowledge and wisdom. It is the Dexter Diner scene, and Dexter himself represents the Jedi at the time losing touch with the people of the galaxy they're trying to defend and protect, being so insulated. Remember, Kenobi's looking for clues on a Camino saber dart, and the droids, even though it's a deleted scene, they've said, we don't know anything. After this scene, Jocasta Nu will be like, no, if the planet was erased, it's not in our records. It didn't exist. The Jedi are kind of lost behind their walls, and Kenobi goes to the people. He goes to the street. He also finds comfort in a friend. It's connection, it's warmth, and it is a scene about knowledge and wisdom and what the Jedi are losing and what they're failing to see of the big picture. It's a very important scene, but wrapped up with two waitresses, one a droid, one Hermione Bagwell that was supposed to be Dexter's wife but ended up not being, and a Mel's Diner cook. It's fantastic. So when did you connect with the scene or the character in your Star Wars journey?
I know, I'm sure everyone said, like now everyone says this, but I actually was one of the few people that that grew up on the original trilogy and loved all three prequel movies, like in the theater when I saw them. I remember going with my brother to see Attack of the Clones, and we went, and then at like 7 or whatever, like whenever it first aired that night, and then we went straight back at 11 p.m. and saw it a second time that night, and just the whole movie, like there's things that even the first viewing you're like, some of these scenes are a little off, but just instantly I was in on the movie. And the Dexter scene, I was initially, I was like, I don't know how this doesn't feel like it's in a Star Wars movie. But then the more you think about it, and you think about George and what he was all about and the other movies that he's made, and you're like, well, obviously he's going to do this. And
yeah, he's going to run right at it.
He fits in with the, I don't know what the right word is, the vibe of what George did in the special editions. Like what he added to the special editions was the weird, even weirder than what we got stuff. The crazy, weird stuff in the Phantom Menace had a lot of that too. So by that point, like I was on the mindset that Star Wars is going even weirder than it used to be. And like when I was a kid, like the frog thing burping outside Jabba's palace in that split second was like the weird moment in Star Wars. Now the whole thing's weird, and it just didn't really bother me. I thought the character I liked the design of the character. Like it was being an art person my whole life. Like that was in the prime early 2000s was the prime era for me of like watching movies to see what the special effects were like, how real is it going to look, and seeing a CGI character interact with a human and it being kind of seamless. I mean, now maybe it doesn't hold up as well as it did back then.
Sure.
And then watching the behind the scenes and seeing that they had to like fake Obi-Wan's arms going around the Dex character and all of that. It was just everything that I'm about and everything that I like about Star Wars wrapped up in a weird thing that reminded me of watching like Happy Days reruns with my dad when I was a kid or whatever. Like that's not an era that I have any nostalgia for. I wasn't around back then, but like my parents were around and experienced that time. So like I grew up being aware of all of that stuff and watching old reruns of shows that were set in that time, and being a kid where in the 90s, sitting in my room drawing, I would have Nick at Night on, watching all these old TV shows that I don't have any connection to, but I became familiar with them just because you got to have something on the background while you're focusing on whatever 3-hour drawing you're doing. And so that era wasn't foreign to me. So that didn't shock me. Right. It was just kind of weird to see like a clean version of Star Wars. It was like the opposite of everything we got in A New Hope with the cantina. It was like, no, this is like clean and shiny, and dishes and cups have actually been washed. Or in the cantina, you assume Wuher was just like spitting in the glass and wiping it out.
And just giving a...
Yeah.
Akmena might have cleaned some things at night, but it didn't last until the morning. I love everything you're saying about this, because even going back to the beginning of some of the stuff you're saying, you're talking about George Lucas and the special editions. You're not wrong about that at all, of even some of the stuff that didn't initially work for me in the special editions and still might not work for me. You know, will I ever come around on Joe Yowza completely? I don't know, but I'm closer to that point than I was in 1997. But it does speak to what you're saying. It wasn't just George adding things in. It was continuing his vision forward, that he's famously said, look, I couldn't do this in 76 as I'm making a New Hope. I couldn't make the cantina as weird as I wanted to. And also there's a spirit of fun. So, I mean, you say that and that reminds me of like, he showed his cards along the way. Like, so for you to say it's not surprising for George to put a 50s diner in, I think is very right. And also, it's kind of fun. A lot of what you're describing, the weirdness does carry with it this inherent just kind of appreciation for having fun, a love of fun in Star Wars. For George to be like, yeah, I love this culture. I love the up riding up and down, the dragging the strip, American graffiti, all that stuff. Hell, if I go to Mel's Diner on Sunset, George's pictures are in there. So for him to just go, yeah, let's put it in there because I'm doing a 50s film noir thing.
Yeah.
Weird does not always equal fun, but for George and Star Wars, it is, to me, infusing just fun, wonder, and creativity in a lot of the stuff. And as an artist, you probably have appreciated that from the beginning. Do you want to sit down and just design a dank cantina all the time? No. What would a diner in space look like?
Yeah, it's kind of like the baseline of being a creative person of any kind, artist, writer, whatever. Like, if everyone's doing the same thing, your instinct is to try and find some other direction to go into because you don't want to just do the same thing as everyone else. Like, what's the most obvious idea? And then don't do that. Go in a slightly different direction.
Yeah.
And so, like, I wouldn't want just another cantina and another. I know this is what we love, so I won't talk about this much, but that's why I never connected with the expanded universe, because I felt like it was just the same thing we'd already gotten. Just here's a new version, like there's ATSTs in every scene, and like it didn't feel different. So when the prequels came out, it was, we're doing Star Wars, but we're doing it completely differently. The ships are clean, the environments are new, everything's fresh looking. It's not just a rehash of what we've already seen before, and that really is what excited me about it. I think, even if I didn't realize it at the time, looking back on it, it was the direction that, like, not that I could have made those movies, but if I was, that's the direction I would have gone with it. Like when I make the Photoshops and post them online, people are always suggesting things. Oh, you should do one like this or whatever. And they don't realize that pretty much assures I'm never going to do that because that's your idea. But I want to think about, like, what's the most obvious thing, and then try and find a different direction, preferably completely the opposite direction, but still make it work. And that's like the challenge of it. Like, if you like the challenge of creating an art, then you're going to look for it and not just do the most obvious thing. So that's, even though at the time I wouldn't have thought that, like, or realized that, like, if they would have done just a dirty cantina on Coruscant that Obi-Wan went into, I probably wouldn't have noticed, or it would have made sense back then. But now I'm glad they went in the opposite direction.
Yeah. This is fascinating. This show, Blank is White with Star Wars, usually starts somewhere, and it's going to, us today, it's Dexter Jettster. We're going to spend a lot of time on Dexter here, but it goes to where it needs to go. And you're taking this conversation into a arena of what is art and how do you approach art. And I'm with you. And I think you and I share a similar streak, maybe to our detriment, Bryan, where, what people think, hey, you know what you should do is, like, Ken, you should start doing reaction videos. No, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And if I'm going to do it, it's going to be my version of it. And it's going to be the least successful version because the tide is going this way. And it's not that I'm just going to be a contrarian, but I want to do what interests me. And again, that doesn't always work. And George will tell you, well, I don't know, money-wise it worked, but my reputation took a hit. And, we know that the story's there. Because he decided to go his own way. And I know even George has some critiques of the sequel trilogy, especially Force Awakens, being too similar. And I don't think that's wrong. I think that was a different approach, and I think it's used correctly. It's an examination of Star Wars nostalgia. I really do believe it. But I'm really liking what you're saying and how I've appreciated this stuff more. And as my appreciation of the prequels has grown, documented on the podcast, documented here on ForceCenter, a lot of it is appreciation of George as an artist or just art overall. I follow you, whether it's Lady Gaga or David Bowie or any kind of artist out there that a stand-up comic that finds their own voice and sticks with it. I think I'm fascinated with that now more than 25 years ago when I'm sitting there going, it's a 1950s diner. But,
Yeah.
and I'll pitch it back to you, taking this to Dexter, the change in my heart of versus, oh, wait, I think I like what's going on, does begin in a lot of ways with things like the pod race, with the seismic charges from Django and his ship. But it's Ronald Falk's voice as Dexter. The warmth, the familiarity, the wonderful weirdness of Camino Saber Dart. The silliness, because the original trilogy, as cool as it was, and as dark and gritty as Empire was, it is. But it's like Akbar's "It's a Trap" wasn't a famous quote right off the bat. That came years later, but it was a shared language and love between fans where you could just drop a line. You would laugh like Jabba the Hutt, and people would be in right away. That was Dexter for me. So a lot of my prequel love started with those kind of things before I appreciated the big picture, and I credit Dexter with a lot of it. You said you were on board from the beginning, but take me to the early days of your Dexter love.
It's weird because like I've always liked the character, but he was never the standout.
Right.
Like it's really been the last few years where it's become a thing where he is like my favorite character or whatever. Like I never disliked him or anything, but he was just one of the many things about the prequels I liked. But it's really like all the photoshopping of him over the last few years has elevated him to where it's almost like people think he's more of my favorite character than he actually even is. Like obviously I love the character, but like some people seem to think it's like the Star Wars for me. And I'm like, I mean, it's great, but like, it's not my whole Star Wars identity isn't Dexter Jettster, but,
yet here you are on a show called Dexter Jettster's Why We Love Star Wars. So now I'm part of the problem, Brian. I'm part of the problem.
Actually, I think the first Dexter Jettster Photoshop I ever did is hanging above your head in the background right now.
It is. It's up there. I'll have to grab it.
That was the first time I ever did anything with him. Like I always liked the character, but that was the moment where I started. It's not a very long scene, so if you're trying to take pictures from
3 minutes.
That scene and Photoshop it, you kind of have to use the same pictures over and over and over again, which does add to the challenge and which probably makes me more interested in it than I would be if there was 1,000 images of him. It's like, how many different ways can I use this exact same image over and over and over again? Because you got him at the table from the side, you got him zoomed in, you got the scene where he walks up to Obi-Wan and hugs him, and that's really all the footage you have of him in live action. Yeah. So it's like, and I've taken pieces and made new poses and stuff of him, but it makes it even harder because there's so few images to use, and it's like it's kind of like the somehow Palpatine returns. It's like, how many times can I use this exact screenshot over and over and over again
to work it in,
and still get a reaction out of people online with it?
I think it's part of the joke too that I love. Yeah. How much of that I'm joking and saying I'm part of the problem, but I understand what you're saying of Dexter isn't like your favorite character, but the love of Dexter is almost one of your favorite things. I'm in that too. I think because of your picture, I think I'm associated with Dexter a lot, and there's some other people in the space who are associated with Dexter too. And I'm honored that was the first Dexter Photoshop. Was my dumb face for a promotional poster that I think I still have about 30 actual printed out posters if anyone wants them. Going pennies on the dollar. But there's a little bit. So I'm talking about the poignant side of the scene, which I really truly believe. And Joseph and I did that to our episode. It's all there. I was having this conversation with Todd Stashwick at a party and Kirk Thatcher. And I had mentioned, we're talking Star Wars, and I'd mentioned that this is like one of my favorite scenes, if not the most important scene in the prequel. Now, that is not necessarily 100% true, but I said it as this, it's almost like a challenge to see who am I going to pull closer or who am I going to push away. And Thatcher, if you don't know who Kirk Thatcher is, he was the punk in Star Trek IV that Spock does the neck hold on. But he also went on, he worked on Return of the Jedi and did a Creature Shop and stuff, and he's a great, great guy. But he was kind of like, you can't be bleeping serious. I refuse to accept that you love that Dexter scene. Where Stashwick was like, tell me more. Yes, I want to know more about what's in the scene. So all this to say, and this fun party story, but to say that like Dexter's become a litmus test where if I discuss the scene, if you can connect with it in any way, the deep themes that I think are there, or just the silliness and the warmth and the fun of it, then you're this kind of Star Wars fan I want to hang out with at a party. Unless you're Kirk Thatcher, I'll hang out with him all the time. Is any of your love of Dexter, like you're describing, hey, he's not my favorite, but I love him, a little bit of this like defensive shield? Like, I'm not going to let you come at Dexter because Dexter has a lot of fun to him and a lot of things I love. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I started to love him more when I had to defend him.
Yeah, I guess kind of like, I think more for me, he's kind of like the line where the fans that are all in and will buy into any weird stuff that the Star Wars universe will give them, they're going to be on board with somebody like Dexter Jettster. But the fans that, I don't know, more like, we love Andor, like, we don't like the weird stuff. We want Star Wars to be dark and gritty. We don't want Boss Nass and Sebulba and all this weird kid stuff. Like, Dexter's almost like the line where they might go up to Dexter and be okay with him because Obi-Wan is there and it's a important scene and he's a little more gritty than
he's dirty
than like the Eope farting or whatever. Like,
that's the scale. Eope fart, Dexter butt crack. What's the scale? Somewhere in there is where you love Star Wars.
He's kind of like the middle ground where they might come that far and join us on that part. So it's like, I guess it's kind of like that. The other thing that I've always thought, when people don't like that scene, but then they love things like the Clone Wars, I'm like, the Clone Wars doesn't happen without Dexter Jettster. If he doesn't tell Obi-Wan about Kamino, like, do they ever get the clones? Like, he's the key to the Clone Wars. Like, all this stuff that you love and hold up as the greatest thing ever doesn't happen without this CGI chef hugging Obi-Wan Kenobi.
That's true. Dexter Jettster, the key to the Clone Wars, the key to all of Star Wars. Does reside in Dexter. What about the design overall? And actually, jumping back a little bit, I agree with you too on the Andor of it all. Love Andor. I just completed my Andor rewatch. Hot damn, I love that show. I love the writing, I love the dialogue, love the performances. I'm on board. I love stories of war and Star Wars and rebellion and politics. It's all there. But, you know, Dewey and Freedy are a highlight of that series because they stand out for being so weird. And I just love, I'd love more people to accept that this is the same world. Meeber Gascon exists in the same world as Luth and Rael. In fact, they might be on the same side. Meeber Gascon should be in the second season of Andor. It would work story-wise. And you said famously, this is amazing. I can finally actually say it with you on camera with me. I've quoted you, and maybe sometimes without permission because it could cause problems for you. I apologize. Your description of Andor is for Star Wars fans who are embarrassed about being Star Wars fans. Shouldn't, number one, be taken too seriously by anyone out there who's an Andor fan and that's your favorite thing. But it's always what you're talking about of like, love Star Wars. But if you love Star Wars, you know, an Eope farts in a Gungan's face, that is part of it. A frog burps outside of the palace. The Sarlacc pit burps as it eats. Like, and I'm not saying it's all gross out humor, but I'm just saying it all kind of exists in the same thing. It is the same.
Yeah, and it's it's kind of been the lifelong battle. Like, it's never been a huge battle for me because everyone that knows me and throughout my life knows me as like the art guy. Like when you're known as an artist who tries to make people laugh with Photoshops or drawings or whatever, dumb animations, they're not going to be surprised to find out I like all the weird stuff in Star Wars. It's like they would almost expect me to be on board with all that stuff. But there has been kind of like a lifelong battle of, even from like my first Star Wars movie was Return of the Jedi. That was the one that I was like big into. Like, I'd seen them all obviously, and grew up watching them all, but it's the one where realizing that, oh wait, some people don't like the Ewoks. I thought the Ewoks were amazing. Like, I want every Ewok action figure I can get. And then hearing like my dad say, "Oh, that's kind of dumb." Like, I mean, he was also an artist, so he wasn't against that weird stuff.
Yeah.
But just as an adult who in the 80s, watching media was a lot different for people back then. But
Right. Different time.
but it's kind of been a battle of like getting people to accept you as a normal human who, even though you like the part that they put in the Star Wars movies for kids, I still like that stuff. The part of me that I don't do it for like because I don't want to be unhealthy, but the part of me that would get up every day and eat, I don't know, Cocoa Puffs like for breakfast and watch some cartoons or whatever it is. The part of me that's holding on to childhood all these years later, maybe more than I should. Looking behind me, like obviously I haven't given up on it totally, but like that's kind of like it. Like I'm not ever going to stop liking all of this stuff and turn into like the adult that people think you're supposed to turn into. And it's easier for me because people expect people that are artists to be weird and not be normal and all of that. But like Dexter, not that he's like the poster child for all of this, but like he represents that. Like I can like this weird thing in this weird diner in the movie that everyone hates the most from the entire series, and the whole and has a million bad things to say about it, but that can be my favorite thing. And I challenge, like, it's almost like not like a confidence thing, but more of like, I like that, and like I'm not going to shy away from that. I'm not afraid to tell people that. If you don't like it, I don't care. Like if you don't like me for liking it, I don't care. Like I'm just going to be like, this is what makes me different than you. This is like, without saying anyone's name specifically, but I've worked with people in the past that kind of hate the stuff that I like in Star Wars,
right?
And they don't get it. They don't understand how I could like it. And like, the reason that you're hiring me to do your creative work is the reason why I like this stuff and you don't. Like, you need me to design your stuff because you don't like this thing in Star Wars. Like, that's the line. That's the difference between you and me is I like this weird stuff and you don't. Like, our brains are just different. Like,
and I love this, and it's not about right or wrong. Like I said, I love the last 30 minutes of Rogue One are some of my favorites, and I wouldn't call it silly and weird. I'd call it a war picture. Like, it's all part of the tapestry of the Star Wars blanket there, the rug that George started making in 75, 76, 77. But yeah, it is. Dexter is kind of the poster child in that in a way. There is a leaning into it of what you're describing too is a lot of what we talk about on Star Wars. And I just love that Dexter's leading this conversation of the playing with your action figures type of critique, because it seems to be awash in this, it's just nostalgia, or you didn't grow up. Oh, I got it. You didn't grow up. And I would argue that, no, that's just imagination carried out. That was the beginning, action figures or art, or you celebrated it. What you're describing, and I know you're a humble guy who talks about your silly little pictures, but what you're describing, your love of that artistic side of Star Wars that comes out in the quote-unquote weird, is also probably what brought Dennis Muir and Phil Tippett and Ben Burt and all the kind of people who helped create the universe we love. I bet they're the weirdest of the weirds when it comes to Star Wars love. Just look at their designs. Look at the things they came, a Gamorrean, a pig guard, a Rancor. Like, it's weird stuff if you want to look at it from that, or it's just bursting at the seams with imagination. And I think that's why it should be celebrated. I'm not saying it has to be everyone's favorite part, but I just wish there was a better understanding of what it represents versus what you're describing, experiencing by some folks of a brush off. I know some people who Dexter is the epitome of the worst of Star Wars. And I think that's kind of started my genesis of going, you know what, I've always kind of liked the scene, but now I feel I need to defend it. I'm gonna entrench myself in Dexter's Diner because that's just not right to me. Like what you like, but it's not the worst of Star Wars. It represents important themes, great imagination, wonderful artistic ideas put on the screen, and also fun. And I want Star Wars to have fun. So Dexter is the poster child, Brian.
Yeah, he's just, I don't know. It's just the weird part of Star Wars that is what pulls me in. He represents that. Like, he's like the safe version of that. Like, you can go even weirder. You get into other characters that people really, really don't like that I still like. Like, even in Attack of the Clones, probably maybe my second favorite Attack of the Clones character is another scene everyone hates, which is Ilan Sleazebagano. Like, that scene, I remember people ripping that scene for years, and I'm like, that was one of my favorite moments in the movie. It was so stupid. Like,
we could also probably do a mini-sode on Ilan Sleazebagano's Why We Love Star Wars. I just watched that scene the other day. I had it on in the background, and that popped up, and I laughed and just had this big smile because 22 years ago at the time of this recording, like, that scene and then the name it elicited this big, oh, come on from me. And now it's like, oh, yes, please more. Like, I want more of that. I want Ilan Sleazebagano to show back up in the Mandalorian and Grogu film.
Yeah, and the name, like, for me, the name made it even better. Like, that's the stuff I like in Star Wars, the dumbest thing possible. Like, I used to listen to a non-Star Wars podcast years ago when I was bored at work. This is before Disney bought it, and we all thought it was dead forever. But and one of the guys on there, I remember him saying that when they make their videos or their shows, they think, what's the dumbest thing we could do right now? And then they would go in that direction. And, like, I connected with that because, like, that's when I make a Photoshop or whatever, I'm like, I try and think, what's the dumbest thing that I could do? Like, not what's the best thing or what's going to get the most reaction from people. Like, how dumb can I make this? Mostly for myself. And, like, I know there's a core group of people that follow me that are going to enjoy it. Yeah. Or sometimes the joke is directed at one or two specific people, and everyone else also enjoys it. But it's.
Are you creating that? And are you saying that in an attack way or a celebratory way? Like, you got to show like, that person.
No, I mean, sometimes, like, but it's more of like, I know this person that follows me or this person I know is going to see it, and they're going to get the joke.
Yeah.
And hopefully some other people do too. Like, I still have no idea why photoshopping Dexter Jettster into a screenshot from the bear ended up getting 81,000 likes on Twitter. Like, that makes no sense to me. Like, a random screenshot of a random character from everyone's least favorite Star Wars movie. And it's one of the most successful tweets I've ever had in my entire life. And there's barely even a joke there. I just literally swapped out one character and put Dexter in there.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
well, I mean,
like, that's just dumb. Like, the whole thing is dumb. Like,
yeah. And quite frankly, we won't call out any names, but quite frankly, got that stolen from a successful insert something else into movies and TV shows channel, who just quite frankly stole that from you and replaced Dexter with a bear of some sorts. Anyways, literally 2 bears. No, I love it. I think there's something so perfect about Dexter. Dexter's built for what you do. The inserting Dexter into a shot, and the fact that I love that you have only 3 or 4 shots to choose from, really. The one you showed your work on, was it on your Midnight NAS channel? I'll have the link to it, where you showed the Mandalorian Season 3 out for ice cream treats. Dexter was just genius. Dexter's perfect for that.
Yeah, that's another, this is so dumb. Characters walking through basically like a state fair environment, eating ice cream on a stick and talking like everyone's going to hate. I remember watching it thinking, I can hear certain people already not liking this. and I
Yes.
haven't even opened social media or listened to a podcast or a review. I already have a list of people in my head that are going to be ranting about this exact scene. Meanwhile, I think it's amazing because it's so dumb.
It's so dumb and weird. What without showing too much of your magic, though, again, I highly recommend people check out you putting that Photoshop together. What when you're well, you kind of just described it, so maybe I'm asking a bad question here, but when you're watching something, how do you know in your heart? Is that the barometer that everyone else will think is so weird and stupid, so Dexter has to appear there? Do you have those moments? Do you have to work for him? Or does Dexter just speak through you?
It depends. Like, honestly, most of my ideas, I don't. Sometimes things will spark when I'm watching a show, but most of the stuff that I do, like, I think I've tweeted this or posted or whatever we call it now, this out before, but like most of the Photoshops I post online is me kind of warming up. Like, I don't want to work. I don't want to go to my desk and work, but I'll think of an idea that I think is funny or that I think people will like that will take 15 minutes to put together. And that kind of gets me going and like the juices flowing or creativity flowing.
Nice.
And then once that's done and I post it, then I can go straight into the stuff that maybe I wasn't as excited about doing that day. So it's more, there's a purpose to these Photoshops beyond just making people hopefully laugh or get some likes or whatever. So
Dexter's your warm-up act. Dexter gets you going.
So sometimes like a scene like that, I'm like, that's a really dumb scene. I know there's going to be something I can do with it. Like maybe the idea of putting Dexter didn't pop into my head immediately, but most days there's a few minutes where I'm either sitting in my chair right here at my desk or I'm on the couch or wherever. And I'm just like, I just stop and think like, what idea do I have to make something today? Like, I don't have any idea when I wake up in the morning that I'm going to make this image. It's just start thinking about what are people talking about in Star Wars? What is a big deal right now? How can I add something else into that? Like, and make something out of it. Like last week I posted, the Skeleton Crew kids at a Pizza Hut, like in 90s Pizza Hut. Like, that wasn't an idea I had when I woke up. I was just like, what is everyone talking about? I saw somebody mentioning like the shot of the neighborhood as the bus goes down under and it kind of pans out. And I was just like, if that was on Earth, there would be a Taco Bell or a Pizza Hut or something in the distance. I was like, well, what if I add that to it and then Photoshop the kids, find an old shot of 90s Pizza Hut or whatever and put the kids in there. And that's the moment where I'm not sure if it's going to happen because I have to kind of pan through the screenshots that I can find online and can I find angles of these kids that are going to work in the booth.
It's crazy. So
you kind of have to do a few minutes of research, and it all kind of comes down to how quickly can I put this together. And those pictures, I knew I could get the Neil, and because he was the one of him with his arm on the desk, I knew that one existed. But then it's like the other three kids. Can I find over the
shoulder
back shots that can be the back? And I just happened to find the right ones. I had to make the fern out of like 2 or 3 different pictures of her and pieced it together. But so there's a lot of ideas that are half finished that are sitting on my desktop because I just couldn't find the pictures in the amount of time that I was willing to spend on it. I'm sure I could find it if I went through and downloaded the whole show or the whole movie and went frame by frame. I could maybe find it, but at some point it's not worth the time. But goes back to the challenge of Dexter. It's like you've got these set images that you can use, set angles. How many ways can you take this angle and put it in to different photos? And
again, I think that's the genius of it because Dexter's He's good for a laugh. He's good for a smile. Your photoshops are an extension of what Dexter is. He is comfort. He is friend. Your friend. He is the advice. He's the steadying arm you need while you're having ice cream in downtown Coruscant at a fair.
Yeah, I think Dex, even though he might not have been my favorite character, like he might have been one of many characters I liked equally. Mm-hmm. The thing that's elevated him is that he became like the character that challenges me to fit him into as many different things as I possibly can with the same photos. Like it kind of all was just like a perfect storm. And that Photoshop stuff is what has elevated him to the level where he's like the character people know me for or whatever. Kind of like Alex with Biggs, Darklighter, or whatever, where he's forever going to get like any time. So like if Dexter ever shows up in one of these Disney Plus series, or they announce a Dexter Jettser Black Series figure or whatever, like that's why I have to watch all these shows as soon as they come out, because I know if he does show up in it, I'm going to get people tweeting me before I even watch it, and it's going to be spoiled for me.
Yeah. Dexter's gonna. I love that. The reason you're like, I have to watch it at the minute it drops is Dexter. Dexter's going to be the one. Yeah. And the time we have left here, just to talking about Dexter himself. There, what about his design are some of your favorite things about it? And that includes the pants falling down, or the scene itself that you like. Like I said, the Camino saber darts quote, and how big your pocketbooks are. I mean, I love every moment of that scene there in that regard. But for me, it is the little moment, and I'll let you answer, is just the warmth and the Obi-Wan in that hug, man. The fact that Dexter's a hugger is one of the things I just love about the guy. Anything stand out for you in terms of design or the scene itself?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing for me was all of the years where I never realized he even had a mustache, and now it's like I can't not notice it. Yes. And every time I've drawn a picture of him or whatever, I always go over the board on the mustache, probably too much, because like now it's all I see. So like, and
you want to pass on the knowledge. You want other people to know.
Yeah. And I don't know, it was the weird, he kind of comes from that weird early 2000s character design stuff of CGI characters where they were almost like a 80s, 90s cartoon character made into 3D. Like,
yeah.
They all have the big, like, chins and all wide smiles and big, weird eyes and stuff. So just his overall design, and the fact that he had 4 arms. Like, at that point in my life, I can't lie and say I was familiar with the holiday special or anything about the holiday special. But now looking back on it was a thing that George hated, the holiday special, but there was a 4-arm chef in the holiday special, and now he adds his own 4-arm chef into his movie. It's almost like he was saying, like, oh, I'm going to pull that part out and make my version of it. And so like just the fact that he was kind of like a beefy chef, I don't know, he just felt like a chef in the Star Wars universe to me, on every level. And it was just
and people might be I can hear the keyboards there. There's Dudnik Sharpels, and yes, I did look it up, who is a 4-armed human chef from the Droids cartoon. Right. Oh, so, and then you got the COO series cook droids, which have been showing up a lot, all that stuff. Yeah. And again, whether or not George was like, hey, as we're prepping Attack of the Clones, remember Dudnik Sharpels? I want that. Yeah. But it's possible. And how much did George have on a day-to-day, operations with droids? Probably not a lot. But it does speak to, again, the weirdness and just the joy of possibility. And Dexter should have 4 arms, right? It would seem weird to me if he didn't have a mustache and 4 arms, because he needs one. Yeah. He doesn't need a belt. He has a set of arms for that.
Yeah, and we haven't really mentioned it, but just kind of off in a slightly different direction. One of the things I really liked about the character overall in the movie was that he felt like he had this past where he had done all of this different stuff. He knew about everything. Like he hasn't been a chef his whole life, or if he was a chef, he was like a chef on a ship that traveled.
Right.
And he had all this knowledge. Like a Jedi could go to the Jedi archives, not find what they're looking for, and their first thought is, oh, I can go talk to Dexter because he knows as much or more. He's going to know all the stuff the Jedi don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how does a chef in a little diner in the middle of a giant city, how is he the guy that knows all of that stuff?
What you're talking about too is one of our favorite phrases here that Joseph brought into our lexicon of the tip of the iceberg storytelling. Dexter definitely is that. That's part of the wonder that I think the scene brings. Is, you know, I'm not saying I've spent nights awake dreaming of what Dexter did, and I know there's been some supplemental stories, and we have kind of where they first meet in the Kenobi novel, and there's been some other stuff. There's definitely a Dexter Jettster renaissance that's gone on in the last few years that I quite frankly think you're part of. But I love that. I love that at some point he settled down, opened up a diner, learned to cook along the way. Hires Hermione Bagua and WA7 and creates a little stopping point for the community, and it makes a lot of sense. And again, I think part of George's point, I really do think that the layers are there on the stuffy Jedi Order at this time had lost contact with the ground level, as what happens often with those in power. You lose contact with the ground you're supposed to protect and the people on it. And here's this guy who you could look down upon. He's a dirty chef. His food's probably not even that good, but he's got what you need because he's been out there. Dexter Jettster's of the people, man, and that's I think a lot of what's going on in the scene.
Yeah, I maybe on some weird level, he kind of reminded me of my dad because we're like, I grew up in the middle of Missouri, like nowhere, very Tatooine-like, but my dad being in the Marines and being traveling the world and knowing how to do seemingly everything. Anytime anything ever came up, if your problem with your car, problem with the house, whatever, like he knew how to fix it without having to look it up or go find a book about it. He just knew how to do it. Yeah. And it's like, how does someone in the middle of nowhere know how to do all this stuff? And you've been to all these different places in the world, but you don't, it's not like a part of your life. It was almost like maybe that tapped into it too. Like it reminded me of it made me think that Dex was in a war. And even back then and before all the other stories, like he must have been a part of something bigger in the past, and he just kind of ended up here on Coruscant, became a chef, or using his abilities that he learned as a chef, and this is what he does now. But he has this interesting past, and somehow Obi-Wan knows about it, and he's going to use it in his search for clues on this mystery. That really brought, I think at the time in the movie, that was probably what drove me to that scene the most. Outside of the character and the design and all of that, it was very mysterious.
Yeah, well, yeah, and there's something too you're speaking to, which is the idea of it's not just about an age thing. I'm thinking of in terms of age, but my old line of work, you'd hire a lot of retired folks and people, and then you find out that one of the guys I worked on a night shift with in security had 2 Purple Hearts, was on Iwo Jima, and it was fun to talk to him, but it was also hard to watch other people just look down on him because of his job now, because of who he was now, and not even give him the opportunity. And I think, again, I'm not saying the Jedi Order overlooked Dexter, but Obi-Wan's ability to be like, I'm seeing this person for more than what he is, a dirty short order cook at a diner people overlook. Well, actually, it's a bustling crowd. It's a lunch rush. I see who he is. I think that's, again, what is going on in the scene, and I love that Dexter represents that for you, and the memory of your father and all the things he brought to the table and all the people we meet along the way who've got more to tell than you give them credit for. That's all Dexter.
Yeah, you never know someone's backstory, especially like the older you get, the more years you have to not to be forgotten. Like, what were you doing in your early 20s and then in your 30s or your 40s? Like, like different parts of your life kind of fade away and you don't even really think about it yourself, but then other people definitely don't know about it. Like people know me as like the guy that does the podcast thumbnails and posts Photoshops online, but I'm like, I have this other entire career that happened before any of you all even knew that I existed, where I was designing entire campaigns for corporations that where literally millions and millions and millions of dollars were on the line, and it was up to you to design something to make sure that the company got that money, and people's jobs were on the line, and it was very stressful and very high level, and it's like nobody knows all of that stuff about me because they only know me since the last 6 or 7 years, and all of that stuff, I don't think about it, or it impacts me, but it's not like I used to design like NASCAR t-shirts for a living for a while. Like, I don't even like NASCAR, but like,
yes.
like who knows? Yes. Like, that's not something that anyone would know about. I mean, you could see from some of the designs of t-shirts I've done on my TeePublic,
Definitely.
like the one I'm wearing are influenced by that history, but it's not something that I talk about or anything, or that's a part of my personality. It's like a part of my past where someone could come to me and say, hey, what kind of Harley Davidson motorcycle is this?
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing about me that says I would know what it is, except the 8+ years of my life designing Harley Davidson apparel and having to know what every model and make of those bikes were to put them on designs. Like, I've forgotten more about Harleys than like I even want to think about. I don't even have a motorcycle or care about motorcycles, or have never ridden one, but I was one of the people designing the stuff that these people that do like it were buying. And so you have to know about it, even if you don't like it.
See, you have really, all of this episode has been to dig to the core of your love of Dexter. You are Dexter Jettster, my friend. You're Dexter. You got more to you, and you have value of what you are, who you are, but also of what you brought to the table. We are all Dexter. How about that? That's the lesson we learned today. We are all Dexter.
Yeah, everyone can be Dexter and should be Dexter.
Everyone should be Dexter. Do you have, as we start to sign out here, this is I'm putting you on a, I'm surprising you with this. Do you have a couple of favorite Dexter Photoshops that are like your personal favorites?
I don't know. I mean, there are so many of them. Like that one you mentioned where I put him in to the season 3 of The Mandalorian scene, where he's eating the ice, whatever those things were called.
The ice pops.
The popsicle. And that one I liked. I like the one where I replaced Bo-Katan lounging on the throne.
Yes, that's my favorite.
And then, I mean, there's so many, like, I'm trying to think of, like, I like the ones where it's just random, like putting him in a scene from Andor, or a lot of the ones that kind of kicked it off were the scenes, once the Kenobi series was officially announced, going and making fake scenes where he could show up in the series, taking and the moment where people like ask you, is this real? Is this from the show? Like, if you can trick just a few people. It's one of my favorite moments of all my Dexter Jettster Photoshops is the time that the person got mad at me. And if they're one of the listeners, like, I enjoyed this. I'm not upset about it, but where they got mad because the behind the scenes photo of Ewan McGregor in the Obi-Wan outfit walking to set, and he had the gray like cloak all around so you couldn't see what he was wearing. And I made one of that Dexter PNG that you can find online that everyone uses. And I put that, and I wrapped the cloak around him and made it look like he was walking to set. And someone got super mad at me that I just spoiled that he was going to be in the show. I'm like, this is the most obvious fake Photoshop. I didn't even spend very long on it.
It's one of my worst.
It wasn't even one of my best Photoshops. I literally made it bad on purpose to be funny, and it tricked somebody. Like, even that one, like, so people will just like I remember that. That's probably one of my favorite ones, just because of the reaction that it got.
That's a great one. That's a great one. Love it, Bryan. As always, love talking with you. I love playing Fortnite with you occasionally when we can, or just walking around a convention floor with you. You've always been one of my favorites, and thank you so much for the work you've done over the years for ForceCenter. So much. My comedy shows, you make the best comedy flyers in the biz. Mark Ellis and I agree with that statement wholeheartedly. So appreciate the time. I got some links down below for sure, but before we get out of here, tell them where they can find some of your work, your channels that you want to highlight. I know you're busy doing a lot of things, but where can they find you?
I mean, I post on X, I guess, Twitter X, just at Bryan E. Ward. I think Instagram and Threads, it's Bryan_E_Ward, because there's already a Bryan E. Ward. I'm sure I have a pinned tweet or post on X that has all my links. I have my YouTube channel where I post randomly. It's not a successful YouTube channel where stuff gets posted every day. But if you like Dexter, you can go watch the lo-fi Dexter's Diner video that I made. It's 20 minutes of Dex just cooking and serving food. 50 hours of my life put into that. I started out going, I'll spend a few hours making this, and then it ballooned into this 20-minute thing where it just just go at least click on it. So maybe I feel like I wasted less of my life on it than I did. But that's pretty much it. I mean, you can check out ForceCenter. I do work for Star Wars Explained, so
many others.
I'm sure everyone's aware of them that watches the show. But
a Resistance broadcast as well. A lot of spots. Bryan, thanks again for coming in. For us, you know where you can find us at ForceCenter. All the links down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast and you just discovered us, maybe because of Bryan, because of Dexter, you can find us on social media at ForceCenter Pod. Our podcast is available in a lot of spots. Just search and find us. And merch, designed, a lot of it designed by Bryan Ward, is at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter, and on our Fourth Wall shop, link in the YouTube description. You can support us directly at patreon.com/ForceCenter. And also, for me, go to my website, kennapzok.com. I have been wonderfully designed by Bryan for years. And in fact, my current next headlining show, January 10th, 2025, Bryan did the posters again for the Ken Napzok's Hot Burbank Nights. And if you're local, love to have you come out for that one. Joseph Scrimshaw will be on the show, along with Winston A. Marshall and a lot of other wonderful people. Check out the information on my website. So that is it for Bryan, for Dexter, and all of the Star Wars weirdos out there. We'll see you next time here on ForceCenter.